Good morning. Welcome to College Coffee Talk. Pearl and Andy Lockwood, Lockwood College Prep, and join us with a synchronized sip of coffee or whatever you may or may not have with you. 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Delightful. We are co-located today. I'm back in the office in our subterranean, undisclosed studio lair. Good morning, Pearl.
Good morning, Andy. Hi, everybody.
So we do these shows every Monday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Lockwood College Prep. And then it gets repurposed, sent out to our podcast, which is the number 2, 3, or 4, or 5 podcast on
more than 5.
It depends on the random searches that I used to do. So if you're listening to us on replay or live, the best way to stay in touch with us is to go ahead right now and click on the like or follow or whatever those buttons indicate. Because we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that you just don't hear elsewhere. And that is actually the topic of today's show. Pearl, I don't know if you saw my post, but I'm going to blindside you.
Blindside me.
Okay.
Lay it on me.
We're talking about things you will never hear at your high school's college night.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to share a little bit of college admissions facts, some of which are politically incorrect, that you just, that they don't talk about, either because the speakers at these things aren't aware of what we're going to be sharing, or because it's sort of like the third rail of guidance counseling or school counseling, and they're not supposed to talk about the stuff.
Right.
And then there's also plenty of financial aid things that either are just flat out wrong or omitted or something else. So we'll have plenty to speak about. And if you're with us live and you have any questions or want to share your own experiences at these high school college nights, Pearl, you've been to far more than I have on behalf of our kids. I sort of opted out after the first one, but we have 4 kids, and you've been to.
I went for professional development reasons because it is repetitive. However, I just had to check it out for myself, and I certainly came away from each one horrified because I compared what was being said and what I know and what I do and provide for our clients. And the omissions are so important that it's just not okay. You're leaving half of the, it's like, okay, here's how you cook something, and they don't tell you to, turn the oven off. I don't know, but it's setting people up because they're relying on that night as the totality of the information, because your school is telling you everything you need to know, but they don't. And where they don't could cost you a ton of money, could cost you in admissions. Anyway, I'm sorry. I feel very strongly about this. It's a shame.
All right. Well, that wasn't quite a rant, but that was forceful.
A little bit, but it's school wide and private.
All right, let's get into it. So, enough generalities. Let's get to the specifics here. So I'm going to say this. One of the things that I think is sort of endemic, not just to college night, but just to the whole system in terms of any type of advising you get from either your private high school or your public high school, is sort of the failure to understand the full picture when it comes to what it takes to get into a top school today. So, and I mean, when I say top school, I mean any school that admits 50% or fewer of its applicants. Okay. So, a lot of schools rely on programs like Naviance or SCORE, or there's a few other ones that have come to market lately. And what those programs are supposed to do is to help kids and parents, let's face it, moms, handicap the kids' chances of getting accepted to various colleges. One of the flaws, and one of the reasons we don't use it here at our firm, one of the flaws with Naviance is that it looks at grades and SAT or ACT scores only, whereas admissions officers look at 20 or 25 things. The second flaw is that Naviance will look at just how you stack up compared to the rest of the kids from your high school, whereas admissions officers are comparing you to people all across the country and in many cases the world, but let's just focus on the domestic ones. There's no quota at any given high school, or Duke let 3 kids in this year, they can only let in 1 this year from compared to last year. None of that stuff really exists except in the minds of parents and kids. And
widespread myth.
Very widespread. So what does it really take to get in? This is the politically incorrect stuff that they're not going to talk to you about at these nights. So first of all, race and ethnicity still matters, even though the Supreme Court declared it to be affirmative action to be unconstitutional and a violation of the Civil Rights Act. Colleges are still trying to diversify their student bodies, which is, I think most people would agree, is a good thing. But they can't ask you to check a box, or if you do check a box on the common application, that doesn't get seen by the colleges. But instead, what does get seen are essays. So there are special categories of students who are applying to college who get a boost, who get a little thumb on the scale. And this does not show up in Naviance unless you're looking at some sort of anomaly in that scattergram that gets produced. So we can't really do a visual here, but the graph that they give, the scattergram, has GPA on one axis and SAT or ACT score on another axis. And then you see like a clump of green dots indicating the kids who got in and where they fall, and they tend to be clumped around a certain median. But you'll see outliers. You'll see people who did not get in who were above the median, and you'll also see people who did get in who were far below either or both of the SAT, ACT axis and the GPA axis. So then the question is like, well, how did that person get in? It's usually because that person was a special category, because at most of these colleges, they reserve anywhere from 50 to possibly 80% of the spots for non-academic purposes or non-academic selects or tags. So the politically incorrect component, the first part, first comment I'll say, is that I'll just list them. It's underrepresented minorities. It's international students. It's recruited athletes. They get a big bump. It's children of alumni. It's children of faculty or staff. It's donors or people who are being cultivated into donors. It's quite a few usual suspect type of categories that if you stop and thought about it, you could probably figure out. The second thing that's politically incorrect is that these categories of kids tend to bring down the averages because they tend to have lower grades and lower SAT or ACT scores. And I'm not saying this to be controversial or funny. It's just factually that's the way it is. So, and there are exceptions, of course. And by the way, just because you're an underrepresented minority or a legacy or a recruited athlete or whatever, it doesn't mean that you're rubber stamped and you get in. It's just that you get a little bit of an edge. For example, someone who did not get rubber stamped in, this is sort of you guys probably haven't heard about this at all, but there's this guy who his father worked for an Ivy League school. And he also, when he applied back when you could, he checked off a box indicating, even though he wasn't, that he was African American. The other thing about this guy is that he's running for Democratic Socialist mayor of New York City. But anyway, he did not get in to Columbia University, even though he had 2 special tags or selects, one of which he lied about. I say this frequently.
Oh, that still doesn't work.
Well, I'm just saying, on another note, I don't know if that disqualifies him from being mayor. It may actually qualify him for being a politician. But anyway, so just because you have a couple boxes checked or you're a select or a tag, maybe in 2 different categories, doesn't mean you get in. And if you don't get in, it's probably because your grades and your SAT or ACT scores were well below the median. So draw your own conclusions about that semi-hypothetical example that I just gave. But the bottom line is that these things don't get talked about at your college night or your discussions with your guidance counselor, and I'm not just explaining this because it's some sort of like esoteric or controversial or academic type of discussion. The practical aspect of this is that if you are not a special category and you think you're okay, I'm right in the median of the SAT and ACT, I have a good shot of getting in. Maybe you're looking at something else besides Naviance or whatever. You don't have as good of a shot as you might think, because if you're not one of these special categories, recruited athlete, international student, underrepresented minority, et cetera, you need to be above the median of the SAT and the ACT plus, and great GPA, plus all the other factors, which include extracurricular activities and your essays and your teacher recommendations and sort of, qualitative things are not necessarily easy to quantify. They're some of which are impossible. But my point is that it's easy to get lulled into a false sense of security by your guidance counselor or your school counselor if they don't understand what it really takes to get in, what admissions officers are really looking for. Because if you're not a special category, if you're just a plain old white boy or white girl or an Asian American or a Jewish kid or any of those types of Indian, which is considered Asian for some weird reason, you have to be above the median to give yourself a fair shot. So that's my message. Don't blindly rely on what you hear from your counselor, whether at college night or not. Pearl Lockwood, comments?
I agree. And again, they don't even bring this subject up at all. And yet they are providing the software for you to rely on in earnest to see what your statistical chances are of getting into certain schools. And that is wholly unreliable, as Andy's just explained why.
Yeah.
So that's a huge problem if this is the only thing a student and family is guided by.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But it's crazy.
I know. Anyway, so we're not, listen, this is stuff that we're not just spewing this out of our heads. Like these are comments from our clients for, more than 10, 15 years. I wrote a book about this, The Pocket Guide to Surviving Your Guidance Counselor's Lack of Advice. That book was basically written by me and 27 or 30 co-authors, basically other parents who reported this type of thing, bad advice or lack of advice coming from their guidance counselors. So it's a long-standing problem. I actually don't even blame guidance counselors.
Right. I was just going to interject and say,
they're not trained.
Exactly.
We do all these presentations in our office, and then I go down this rabbit hole discussing stuff like this, and that's when I usually remember to say, like, by the way, any guidance counselors here? And that happened last week. We've had it a few times before. And she was like, "No, that's fine. I want you to work with my kid. When can we meet?" So some guidance counselors take it the right way. We're not bashing. They're not trained in this area. They're overwhelmed.
They're not in a school district to reinvent the wheel. This is just not what happens in school districts.
Or even more so the private schools where we have a lot of clients coming.
Right, for that lack of advice.
All right. So speaking of lack of training, talk about some of the financial aid things. And before you get into it, we're running a webinar tonight. I'm just going to post it right here. I'm trying to post it right here. Oh, there it is. The webinar tonight is called How to Print Scholarships on Demand. And it's really geared toward families who think they can't possibly qualify for anything. So I think that's a good segue into some of the errors of commission or omission for financial aid wise that you get at college night. So take it away.
Okay. So before I launch into, because if this is the only part of what you listen to, what is remiss in the financial aid nights, what I'm about to say, I'm sure, is not covered because I have not even really heard this on the news at large. And it is a staggering fact that is going to affect anybody who needs to borrow money to send their student who's graduating in 2026 or later. This is imperative that you understand how the rules with respect to borrowing has changed. I will give you a quick example because it's really important. This is the most important thing I am telling people right now. Before this upcoming aid year, the one we are currently going to be applying for kids who are graduating 2026, those aid forms become available October 1st. And loans that you would be putting in place for the 26-27 school year will commence in and around mid-April or mid-May. Probably that's what's traditionally done, although we'll see based on what I'm about to say. Okay, up till what's going to be. When a student gets into a school, and let's say that parent has no money saved for college and needs to borrow entirely to send their student to school. I'll give a private school example. Ivy League colleges, all in, the cost of attendance, room, board, and tuition, everything, for 1 year at Cornell University is $95,000. At Columbia, it's $99,000 a year. Okay, so you have that number. And just to be fair, all in at a Binghamton Estate school is $35,000. Just to give you numbers, and you'll see where I'm going. Okay. Up till now, a student, and this continues to be true, students can borrow in their own name $5,500 the first year, $6,500 the second year, and for every additional undergraduate year thereafter, a student can borrow $7,500 in his or her name. The parent, alternatively, from what's been happening forever until now, a parent can borrow either a specified dollar amount, or they can elect to borrow, quote, up to the cost of attendance as determined by that school. So in this case, the student can borrow the $5,500, and the parent can borrow, if they got no other aid, the rest of what's owed to get to that $95,000 cost of attendance. Okay? Okay. So what's changed is the following. Now, a parent can only borrow a maximum of $65,000 for all undergraduate years that one student needs. So it's basically, if a student completes 4 years of undergraduate, a parent can borrow $20,000 the first year, $20,000 the second year, $20,000 in the third year, and only $5,000 in the senior year. You see how very different this is. So
yep, that's a big cut.
It's a huge cut.
Why did this happen?
Even if you're sending your child to $35,000 Binghamton, but this is what this is forcing. It's the $5,500 from the student and $20,000 from the parent. You still have a shortfall of $10,000. So
why?
For all the parents,
why did they do this?
Why did they do this? The reason they've done this is because the government is losing, may even be higher than this at this point, 20 cents on the dollar that they have lent, and 1/4 of all borrowers, and this may even be more, are in default. So the government is losing precipitously. And in the past 5 years, there has been no collection activity on these borrowers. That is also changing. I'm sure you're not hearing this from your guidance counselor. That is all coming to a crashing halt now. Right now, the government, as they try to dismantle the actual Department of Education, they are actively going after borrowers in default in this way. They are garnishing wages. They are culling back on refunds, tax refunds that are owed. This is serious. This is going to meaningfully affect credit. And if you still have children you need to borrow for, you're not going to be able to do it. So for those who say, oh, I'll just borrow privately, great. If you can, that's terrific. But you're going to go through a traditional debt to income ratio analysis as to whether and how much you can borrow. So if you've now been problematic in default or not paying your loans, that's not going to be available for you. So the landscape of this is going to also in some way force the colleges to make some changes, or they are only going to get rich kids, I guess.
No way. I think
Right.
there's going to be different lenders and more kids going to private to public schools too.
Yes, it's going to be very competitive.
So let me just say good morning to, I'm definitely going to butcher some of these names: Peru, Sadham, Thomas, Corazon, Dawn, Amy, Thomas, Christopher. If you guys have any questions about anything we're talking about, today's topic is what you're not going to ever hear at your high school's college night. Right now, Pearl is riffing about the sort of dramatic changes.
Stay home on your college
aid landscape and the private student loans, that public student loans, private student loans. Things are going to be changing that way. And I talked previously about what it really takes to get into college. And I also want to point out, if you're just joining us, we're doing a webinar tonight, how to legally print scholarships on demand. That link is right here in Facebook. Pearl, what other things have you heard about college night or experience at college night, particularly when it comes to advice on what forms have to be filed, not how to fill them out, because they don't do that. But yeah, talk about the FAFSA and any other forms.
At a college financial aid night, anyone I've been to, and pretty much everyone I've spoken to, I've polled some clients along the way. The financial aid night typically comprises of a local SUNY or local, state school representative or community college representative, where the FAFSA only is the requirement for financial aid forms. What do I mean? Well, so there are about 4,000 or so schools out there, and they all take the FAFSA, but a subset, 400 or so schools, mostly all the Ivies, all of the private schools that are the high ticket and frequently sought after schools, require a second additional financial aid form that goes deeper than the FAFSA and is more complicated, has a lot more information involved. That is called the CSS profile. The financial aid nights do not even mention the words CSS profile. So frequently, some people think it's either they just don't know about it and they don't complete it, and then therefore their financial aid forms are late and they miss out on potential financial aid awards that they would have otherwise been eligible for because they didn't know about it. And it's insane to not even mention it. Wonderful, you community college representative who knows only about the little box they work in, FAFSA. Okay, you have to submit the FAFSA. And okay, wait, you know what else they don't cover? When it's due. It's due. Okay, they may give and you'll have till June of 2027 to complete the FAFSA for the 26-27 school year. Okay. Well, guess what, kids?
When did you start doing impressions?
I've always done impressions.
Okay. You're like the Rich Little of college financial aid experts.
Does anyone out there know who Rich Little is? All right. Anyway, if you're a student, you probably don't. Okay. So you see where that is highly problematic. And here's when they're due, which is never recovered. The financial aid forms, which have a completely distinct, separate priority financial deadline than admissions deadlines, are based on how the applicant is applying to that school, be it early decision, early action, rolling admission, regular admission, single choice early action, regular, restricted early action. Anyway, those all have different priority financial aid deadlines that a student is expected to, when they know their list of schools for each one of their schools, look up the priority financial aid deadline may take several clicks, like click, 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 in the website of a school to see when your particular priority financial aid deadline is, and that is the one you need to file before. In my own practice with our clients, what I do, and this is a tip, I take the whole list of schools as known when I'm submitting it, because we can always add additional schools later, which is always important that you remember to add financial aid forms to those schools you later add to applications for. I look at the list, I look up all the deadlines and based on how that student's applying, and then whatever the earliest priority financial aid deadline is, I use that as the deadline for all of the schools. And now you may say, well, wait a minute, what if my kid, child has not applied yet? Is that going to be an issue? Because, it's a regular decision. If they don't have to do the essays, it is not. Those, as I had said, two processes, financial aid and admissions, are distinct processes. And so what will happen is your financial aid application will ultimately be connected to your application for admission, assuming you're admitted. And you will receive a financial aid award letter from all schools you're admitted to. Anyhow, just make sure, as I had said, to add any additional schools to your list as you decide to apply to them. So anyhow, financial aid nights do not speak of any of this. And again, I feel it's highly important because, again, you could be, if you miss those priority financial aid deadlines, you are potentially putting yourself at risk for losing on money, that discounts that you would have otherwise been eligible for. Yep. And sometimes a college could the one you want to go to, hang their hat on the fact that you weren't timely with these forms. So you want to be really precise and look everything up, and that's what I do.
Good. So let me just wrap up here because we're at the bottom of our half-hour segment. There are many other things that you may not hear at your college financial aid night. They may tell you information about deadlines, but only partial deadlines. They will never tell you about how to get more money from the colleges. They will never tell you about strategies. They won't tell you about what types of assets count against you and which ones don't, how to shelter those assets. If you think you make too much money to qualify for aid, what do you do? Because most of those financial aid nights are, okay, you fill out a FAFSA, you probably won't qualify, goodbye and good luck. Thanks. Thanks for coming. Back to you, guidance counselor. So tonight is our, we don't do many of these webinars anymore, but we're back to school. So we're running how to legally print scholarships on demand webinar. The link is right here in Facebook. And if you're watching this on replay or something and the ship has sailed, we might have a recording of it if all goes well tonight. So the link should still work even for replays. Pearl, I'm going to let you get back to your various and sundry preparation. We're getting into crunch time now as all the financial aid applications get released in October. Some have been pre-released, but we're getting all of our clients ready for financial aid, and I am reviewing a ton of essays and applications and finalizing college lists, and this is really the crunch time. If you have a younger child, class of 2027 or younger, my best recommendation is to get all the applications and essays done the summer prior to senior year starting up again in the fall or late August, or depending on where you go to school. We are in New York, but we have clients in all different districts down south. We just picked up a couple of kids who live in Bordeaux. I don't really know what their academic calendar looks like. But you don't want to leave the stuff until the last minute, because then it's going to be, a rush job. You may not have been able to pull off strategies to enhance your ability to get in to college, because when you're applying to college, you're looking at everything on the record from 9th grade forward. So if you don't really think about this until sometime in 11th grade, because that's when you have your guidance counselor meeting, your school counselor meeting about college, you might find out that some of the stuff you should have done is already in the books from 9th to 10th grade, because that's another ship that might have sailed already. So, so we're here to help you avoid all those, so you never have to worry about what you're doing now. Thanks for watching and or listening. You won't miss out on this type of information if you subscribe or like. Please share it, and stay tuned for more information. And if we do more webinars, you'll be on the priority list for those. Pearl, I'll see you later.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Have a great week.